Welcome back to another episode of the Volunteer Build Series. In today's episode, we're going to pick up where we left off last time, which is trying to install this multifunction switch and lighting kit into the Volunteer car. What that's going to entail is removing the dash panel, which is drilling out all of these rivets so we can get easier access behind the dash so we know where our wiring is going to lay. After we've got that laid out, we're going to lay out the entire wire harness, see exactly where we can make our connections, where we need to extend wires, how it's going to fit in the car, and the best way to achieve that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the work of actually getting this lighting harness kit installed here on the Yankee Auto Systems. It is a cold and dreary day, so what we are going to try and do is focus today on getting this main wire harness laid out into the car so that I can try and figure out exactly where I need to extend my wires so that I can make everything match up into the car, figure out exactly where that's going to lay within the car in a manner that is appealing and is effective as well, and something that I can replicate a lot easier. I'm also going to have to try and figure out exactly where to cut any connections on this wire harness to extend them to get them to the points where I need them to be. I am trying to use the kit that I bought as a template for making my own wiring harness kits for these Legends cars. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to start out by drilling out all of these rivets so that we can remove this dash panel. That's going to give us the access that we need to be able to get the harness connection from the multi-function switch, hopefully over and under to this side so that I can run all of my wire harness down here, and then hopefully have everything follow through the trans tunnel out to the back of the car in a manner that leaves enough wire for placement of the taillights and everything. Hopefully in a manner that's not necessarily right here is where you have to do it, but gives you enough wire for everyone else to be able to do that too. Additionally, we're going to have to run the rest of the wire harness up the front of the car to somewhere where the headlights are going to lay. Now, as of right now, my intention is to probably put the headlights just through this bolt here. I'm going to see how that looks, but I'm not necessarily thinking that's how I'm going to do it. More than likely, I'm going to put my headlight buckets right here. I do like them being out wider so that it gives a better light path and you don't have to have as much adjustment to the side. But sitting out here on the side like this is probably going to look a little too solo and not really vibe with the car. So that's my intentions for the wire harness and the work that I'm going to do today. Let's go ahead and set up the time lapse and get to work. let me show you what I have. Essentially what I was working on was making sure that the multifunction switch was installed in its location and run the wire harness across the dash bar where I wanted it to go. Then I had to modify where the wires were cinched together, or at least how they were held together, because it was very tight and it didn't ultimately go in the direction that I wanted to do. I've got the wires ran behind the steering bracket here, and I've got them tucked up, but with still keeping in mind that I don't want them pinched too much. I ran that wire loom all the way across the dash bar here and then drooped everything downwards. I was trying to make sure that I could get the connector down below the trans tunnel here so it was still accessible for the rest of the harness. And I'll explain that when I get the rest of the harness in a little bit. Then what I ended up doing was grouping all the wires in a way so that I could feed the light controller harness over to this section so that it's still within the interior of the cabin, try and protect it a little bit. And then I just used a scrap piece of plastic that I have here as a mounting bracket that I later drilled 2 holes into and then drilled those into this square tube here so that the bracket can sit somewhere that's accessible, easy to unplug, and easy to use. Ultimately, eventually, I am going to get some double-sided tape to put the light controller onto the bracket itself, just so it's not zip tied, but I have it zip tied in place right now just for fitment check. That also does leave me enough room to have the hazard switch run back up towards in the dash area. So that's going to make it so that the hazard switch lays somewhere within this right side of the dash panel, and I can leave that up to myself later when I get the dash panel in and figure out where that's going to be, and customers at their own preference. Now that I have the main function side of the harness installed into the car and know how that's going to lay out, it's time to move on to the main harness that actually contributes all of the power to the rest of the components. I'm going to go ahead and try and lay that out and try and run it down the side of the car here. I think that's going to be the best way to do it. So let's go ahead and test fit some things. Before crawling on my back for a while, I had to make sure to jack up the car a little further. There's not a lot of ground clearance on the car, so this was one, going to be for actually fitting into the space, and 2, make it easier for me to work under. I was having some difficulties getting the vehicle jacked up so that it wouldn't pitch side to side or corner to corner, but eventually I figured that out with a small piece of wood under the front jack on the right front. I have the basics of the main harness laid out, and I've checked to make sure that everything works. So when we get into the car and we go ahead and we turn on the headlights here, you'll see the brake lights do come on. We do have both headlights working as well. This is as far as the harness will allow me to go at the moment, so I've just got these hooked up just to make sure everything still works. We'll go ahead and try the hazard switch first. The hazards work, at least on the rear. And there's the right front and the left front. Next, we'll go ahead and check the left turn signal. This is my left rear. That's working. And the left front is working as well. Now we'll go ahead and try the right rear, or the right side turn signal. It works. And we've got right rear and right front. So now that I know that the basic layout is going to work, it's time for me to set out and actually set the connectors to where they need to be, try and figure out where I need to extend my harnesses and everything like that, try and get the rear laid out a little better as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get stuck into trying to get those things figured out, lay them out, figure out how long they've got to be and how long I've got to extend all the wires. Okay, I have been busy at work. What you saw in the time lapse was me doing the left front harness, extending that needed an extra 50 inches of wire to be able to make it over to the left front headlight. The right front headlight needed 36 inches. So what I ended up having to do was extend the power supply, ground supply, and the control supply. And also for this harness in specific, I also had to extend the high beam function as well. So what I've got after I had the left front done, I did the right front, and then I ended up terminating everything, and this is what I have so far. This is the wire harness with all of its extensions. The original wire harness came in from this plug here, and everywhere where you see a connection is where I had to add some extended wire. So what I ended up having to do was extend all of those wires out towards what would be the right front headlight, and then the other wires all follow along to the left front headlight. I've got it all plugged up. Let's go ahead and give it a test and see if everything works. I'm going to turn on the headlights, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn on all of the turn signals. There's our headlights. Right for the right front is working. The left front is also working. Let's check our high beams. Then lastly, I'm going to flip the hazards, make sure they all work too. And there's the left front. So what that tells me after extending my wire harness for both the left front and the right front side, that everything still works. So now that I know everything works, I'm going to go ahead and try and lay out the wire harness up towards where it's actually supposed to lay and see if I got it right. Now laid in place, it's time to check and see exactly how close or far we came to as far as getting where the actual headlight connectors need to land. This is under the right front fender where the headlight and all the wire harness actually comes through. It comes through between the frame rail and this part of the body here. This piece of the plastic cover that came with the kit is great. I had to trim it down a little bit to make it fit, but other than that, it works perfect. It even kind of has a little kick down here, just like the frame does. I've got all of the wires inside of here, including the horn wires. The horn wires are a bit long, but I think I'm going to leave them that long because this just happens to be where I chose to put my horn because there was an existing hole here. So as far as any customer in the future, if they put their horn a little bit further forward, it's going to be fine. There's plenty of length in there for the horns, but obviously there's only going to be so far that they can go. As far as the right front harness right here, that is intended to go eventually be clamped to one of those bolts that's already there, and one of the bolts that is there securing the fender and the nose piece together. When I go ahead and stick the connector up into its position, with the rest of the harness somewhat mocked in place as to where it will be in space, I can see that my right front connector comes right up there. Now that's going to be okay, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my other connector piece and then about another foot of wire on the end of those connectors. The connector, if I decide to do the headlights here, that'll just be an extra loop of wire that I'll need to make sure to secure. And if someone else wanted to put the headlights more in the front, that foot, along with moving where the wire is or where the connector is, should be plenty of space. As far as for the left front connector, that mocked into place just about fits as well. Now I'm not able to kind of push that wire harness in as much as I was on the right front one, but again, as long as it comes there to that point and I add a foot of wire, considering that the wire harness may go over to this point on the fender or down forward onto the front bar somewhere, it should be perfectly fine. With that being said, I think the extension of the wiring harness went successful. It's not absolutely perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It'll do. As far as the rear part of the harness, the left rear wiring was pretty much spot on. I didn't really need to do anything to that. As far as the right rear wiring, I did have to shorten that up just a bit, and I do have to shorten it a little bit more. As far as for where the taillights are, I've tried to map out different locations of where people might use those taillights. What I have found is people tend to use them in the fender, and they tend to use them at the back underneath of the window or right over top of the closeout panel. As far as the wire length itself, it'll do. The only thing I'll need to make adjustments for is the length of wire that I provide on the end of the connectors. Other than that, everything seems like it's going to fit perfectly well. So I'm going to say that the template for today is taken care of. The only thing I have left to take care of is to figure out the brake wire as far as where that brake pressure switch is going to pick up into the harness. But it has been a super cold day and we've been here for about 8 hours, so we're going to go ahead and call it quits for today. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. My name is Sean. This has been the Volunteer Build Series here on New Yankee Auto Systems. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, New Yankee Auto Systems, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/New Yankee Auto. We've got a new video coming out every week, and hopefully the next video with the Volunteer will be coming back with the modified wiring harness and installation for good. Hopefully we'll also have our headlights at that time and we can get everything figured out and know exactly how we're going to have this car set up. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.